Hello, people, and welcome to this. What is this? Well, we'll see. For now, it's basically just a place for me to make videos about things I've been thinking about lately. So for today, I want to talk about Machiavelli. Not The Prince, his other book, which is called the Discourses on Livy. I think he has other ones, but that's the main one I'm thinking about. And specifically, what he has to say on the topic of virtue. To summarize, he basically says that virtue is essential, and that without it, it's pretty much impossible to have a republic. Personally, I agree with this, and hopefully you'll see why by the end of this video. So, I'll be going over what virtue is, why a republic needs it, and how republics lose it. And at the end, I'll be going over possible ways to restore virtue, including an especially brutal method which is suggested by Machiavelli. So, let's begin. So, before we cover virtue, I think it will first be worthwhile to discuss corruption, which is essentially the opposite of virtue. In general, corruption can be understood as when something isn't quite working as it should be. What this means obviously varies depending on the context, but in the context of a person, it could be someone who is antisocial, lazy, fickle, manipulative, deceitful, arrogant, etc. They would use other people as a tool to further themselves, and they would have a very high opinion of themselves despite not really having done anything to justify that, or if they have, it's still overinflated relative to what they have done. I'm sure that most people who are listening to this can imagine someone who vaguely fits this description. Now, imagine if the whole of society was composed of people like that. Such a society wouldn't really work, nobody would really get along, there'd be a distinct lack of cooperation. This is basically what a corrupt society is. Historically, these sorts of societies invite tyrants, because only the threat of violence is enough to actually force these people to cooperate, which is essential for any society. Virtue, then, can be understood as the opposite of this. It's analogous to things like duty, honour, humility, hardworkingness, honesty, being pro-social, respectful. Cooperation is necessary for any society to function. With virtuous people, cooperation is easy, it's simple, it's voluntary. Virtuous people are motivated by an intrinsic sense of duty to contribute to society. Because it comes from this intrinsic source, different people within a virtuous society can trust each other, and they can act in good faith. Governments can trust their citizens, citizens can trust their governments. The institutions of the society are respected. This is not to say that there can't be turmoil in such a society, only that when such a society experiences these turmoils, they tend to strengthen the society rather than weaken it. Take Rome as an example. When Rome was young and was a virtuous society, or a relatively virtuous society, it experienced great turmoils, the struggle of the orders. Yet out of these, Rome was never conquered, its constitution was refined, and it came out of it stronger than before. Later on, when Rome had been corrupted, it experienced great turmoils again. This was the crisis of the late Republic. The Republic was riven with civil wars and factionism, and eventually it fell and was replaced by a monarchy. Fundamentally, when there are too many corrupt people in a society, cooperation can't really occur in the scale that it needs to for a republic to work. In this case, the society is either conquered from outside, as it is unable to front resistance against an invasive force, or it is subjugated by a tyrant who uses coercion as a new way to keep society together. To be clear, corruption doesn't necessarily manifest as pure self-interest. Sometimes it can manifest as pushing ethnic interests, religious interests, factional, ideological, etc. The key distinction is that the institution of the Republic itself is no longer held in regard and is instead disdained, and the sense of the common good that is shared with opponents, who may be utterly despised but still respected as part of the same Republic, is lost. For example, you might hate a rival political party even to the point of wanting to kill some of its members, but you don't because you still respect the system that you're operating within. However, when you are at the point when you are trying to make it impossible for that political party to compete within the system, then you have basically become disdainful of the Republic, and therefore the Republic is corrupt because people aren't elevating it in the way that it needs to be in order for it to work. It's not just factionalism, but it's when that factionalism is held to be more important than the preservation of the republic itself. It's not just factionalism, but when that factionalism, it's not just factionalism, but when that factionalism is held to be more important than the republic itself. A republic is fundamentally dependent on the good faith engagement of its citizens with its institutions. It's like a kind of mini-game within a bigger game, which is life. It only works and it only benefits its citizens if everybody agrees to play by the rules of the game. This doesn't necessarily mean that the rules are good. People can set up a republic badly, but generally speaking, reordering a republic is a difficult task, and it's likely much more difficult if a people is corrupted than if they are virtuous. When people engage in bad faith, they start to break the rules, essentially metagame the republic. This is where problems start to arise. It can easily start a negative feedback loop, where those who continue to engage honestly are continually disadvantaged, as the benefits of the republic have diminished, and the honest are increasingly exploited by those who are gaming the system, thus creating an incredibly strong incentive for the few remaining good faith actors to disengage in self-defense. The risk of such a downward spiral is why Machiavelli is a proponent of things like regular executions, at least every 10 years, if not more, of people who are inclined to commit treason against the republic. These dramatic displays are there to remind people of the reasons for the republic's existence and to provide strong incentives against anyone who would desire to move against the republic. Corruption isn't a clear and distinct process. It can happen in many different ways, in many different types of people and types of groups. One group may seem virtuous but is actually corrupt in less obvious ways, while another may seem corrupt but is actually virtuous in other, less obvious ways. And both such groups could still be corrupt and dangerous to the republic. Generally speaking, the elites are corrupted first, simply because they're more engaged with the subject of politics, and it's generally easier to comprehensively deceive yourself about a thing you know a lot about, whereas those who are more ignorant, while very capable of deceiving themselves in other ways, are usually less committed to their delusions due to their consciously or unconsciously acknowledged ignorance. They're more humble, basically. Elites are also more powerful and so have more to gain from acting corrupt, and so they're more tempted by it. So corruption destroys a republic, and if a republic is formed amongst the corrupt people, that corruption makes it impossible to maintain. The reason for this is that a republic is predicated on cooperation in service of the common good, that common good often being the republic itself. But for a corrupt people, such a common good doesn't really exist. And so rather than supporting the republic in the common interest, they instead cannibalize it for their own ends and their own interests. Virtue is the force which holds a republic together, and if virtue disappears from a republic, it would be equivalent to if the force of gravity disappeared from the solar system. The whole thing would just collapse. Knowing how dangerous corruption is to a republic, the next question is how to stop it, or how to remove it once it's taken root. There lies the difficulty, and Machiavelli is very pessimistic about this, because fundamentally, corruption is really just a lack of virtue towards a particular thing. In the context of a republic, it is a lack of virtue in being a citizen of that republic. People may be very virtuous in the pursuit of their family's own material interests, but when it comes to the interests of the republic, such people would be incredibly corrupt. The question of how to avoid corruption, then, is more a question of how you cultivate virtue, which is a question of how people can be made to live good lives, and how to align different people to believe in a common good, such as a republic. One option which Machiavelli suggests is to have an absolute tyrant who imposes equality on a people by depriving everyone of everything, taking drastic action, making everything in the state dependent on the grace of the tyrant, destroy old cities and build new ones, make the rich poor and the poor rich, but make sure that the new rich know they are dependent on the tyrant. A complete blank slate, basically. In other words, this is what Stalin did to the Soviet Union. After the state of equality has been imposed, and the tyrant is alone, the tyrant would then forcefully impose a new order, a republic, which would last after his death and serve the common good of the community he rules over. He would have cultivated virtue in the people by humbling them severely, thoroughly deflating even the slightest illusion of importance in anybody's mind, and for those who remain ambitious even after all this, he would simply kill them, unless they could be co-opted to join in his republican vision. This is a less than ideal scenario, and Machiavelli himself acknowledges as much. He calls it a very cruel enterprise, and he says that it's very unlikely anyone would ever do this, since anybody who would want to found a republic to serve the common good is too benevolent to actually go ahead with these actions, and anybody who would actually take these actions is too self-centered and cruel to actually care about serving the common good of the community. So it's dependent on the existence of a very paradoxical individual. I can't really think of anyone from history who's done this. Stalin seems to have done the tyrant part, but he doesn't seem to have done the republic part, which is very unfortunate for the Russians. I can think of a few fictional examples, but being fictional, these don't really bear much on the real world. Now, personally, I'm slightly less pessimistic uh, about this than Machiavelli. I would imagine that, in theory, you could adopt a policy which essentially min-maxes a republic. So you'd have it be as republican as possible based on what the society allows for at the time, and they would try to set up some sort of institution or system which cultivates virtue slowly, and thus allows a republic to get more republican with time. So some sort of like Rashid system. And maybe in addition to this, or alongside this, you'd have some sort of crop rotation constitution, which alternates between monarchic and republican forms of government based on the state of the society it operates within. So theoretically, if you could establish this crop rotation system, you could have virtuous government forever, ideally. Maybe such a proposition is naive and too dependent on the goodwill of corrupt actors, and on the scenario of a corrupt monarchy becoming a virtuous republic, which is perhaps unlikely. I don't know. I doubt Machiavelli would agree with these propositions. He's very critical of what he calls the middling way. But I think it's worth considering them anyway, since I don't think anyone really wants to go through an extreme tyranny to establish a republic, especially since the success of this method is entirely dependent on the goodness of a single person, this being the tyrant, which is unlikely given the fact that they're a tyrant. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please comment down below. Likewise, if you have any thoughts or feedback, I am eager to hear them. I think I'll start a Discord server soon, so if you found this at all interesting or you would like to talk, then please stick around for that. You know, I'm basically giving my thoughts on another guy, giving his thoughts on another guy who's giving his thoughts on the history of Rome. It's basically a react video of a react video of a video essay. So it'd be kind of funny if someone did a react video to this someday, and then the cycle would continue, and then maybe somebody could do a react video to that, and then a react video to that, and it would just infinite recursion. I don't know, that'd be kind of funny.